Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author, entrepreneur, and executive Aaron Shelley. He is an engineer with an MBA. His work with many small businesses and startups created his unique systems perspective across marketing, operations, customer support, sales, and product development. From his extensive work with the academic and business world, he has come to understand and deeply appreciate how related our family dynamics are. Aaron shows us how we can make our families more successful by thinking about our families more holistically through a business lens. We get into this and so much more. Enjoy.
Nice to meet you, man. Thanks for taking some time out for the show today.
Should be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into your life, you have a very interesting backstory that I want to dig into, obviously. The elephant in the room for everyone for the last 3 years has been COVID, and I'm curious, how did you survive that time period, and how has it changed the way that you live your life now?
How did I survive it? Well, at the time when it first came out, I was the COO of a company that was just expanding. So we were kind of like, well, we have enough space. We're just going to keep trucking forward and do the best we can. And I think I actually got COVID before we knew what COVID was. So I was like, I think I'm immune already. So, and then my wife has an Irish dance business, so we had to shut that down because there was some mandatory lockdowns, and then we did some things online. So it hasn't, overall, the stuff has come back. I think a lot of people have got into the idea of remote work. We push back a little bit against that because I don't think it's really that good for people's mental health to be away from other humans. So, but yeah, overall, I'm trying to think what it's changed. It's made me a little skeptical because it seems like there was a lot of experts that kept changing their minds. And it's also made me pretty optimistic because even though it was this crazy thing, it was actually, for me personally, probably that year of 2020, financially, it was one of the best years I've ever had. So it's kind of this, yes, there's always things we want to try to mitigate, but we need to be careful that we don't just get fearful and, lock everyone out and try to protect ourselves. So I don't know. That's kind of where it's come from me, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So let's get a better handle on exactly what you do. There's a lot of facets to who you are. And I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day, and one of the kids is going to look up at you and ask, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
At this point, I would say I'm an author, and my goal is to help families more effectively run and work together so that we can have more intact families, because I think it makes for a better society. And so my goal with the book is to get some of the ideas out, and I'm a technical person, so I'm going to write software, apps, computer games, those type of things, if possible, that support those ideas and ultimately make better families for our community.
And I guess that's a part. So before we get to your life, get to your beginnings and how all of this kind of grew in you, when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, geez. Had to be an athlete. That was the Michael, I think that was when, I'm trying to think, I was so into sports, and I played football and baseball and soccer and every sport every day. I'd come home from school and play. So it was really just like, that's what I loved. That's what I loved watching. My dad was a computer programmer, which was fairly young, and I had no idea what that meant, but I was like, I definitely saw the athletes, and I aspired to be like them at the time.
Let's get to your beginnings. Talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and how some of these seeds got into you to be in technology and to be such an advocate for families.
So I started, the seeds, I had a fairly good family. I grew up in Utah. My dad had a PhD, but he was not a big, I have a PhD, everyone needs to call me doctor. He was like, it's something I've done. And then my mom, she had a elementary ed degree and taught a little bit. And I had 5 other siblings. There were 6 of us total. So I grew up in a big family, enjoyed that. My oldest brother was the one I always competed against because I was always a little bit bigger. And so we kind of went through sports. I loved sports, but kind of when I got to high school, I was doing really well academically, and I realized after I got injured playing football a couple times, tackle football, I thought, I'm going to make my money in a different way, I think. And possibly because I just never had any professional athletes in my family, but I mean, I'm 6'4". At the time I was about 200 pounds. So I was in good shape, but I just realized, I think I'm going to make my money a different way. So then I went to college at BYU, studied mechanical engineering. I love engineering. I love understanding how things work. It was very painful in terms of the math and the sciences I had to do, but it's one of those things where, just like weightlifting, where you get stronger, and then at the end of a semester, I'd be like, holy crap, I can take this test. So I love the engineering side of it. And then I got a job while I was still in school doing engineering at a company that made artificial diamonds, and I was working on some new products for them, and then they weren't getting any business attention. And so it really frustrated me because I thought I could be the best engineer, and yet if I have a bad business person and I don't understand their logic, then I get no credit, we get no success. So then I decided to do an MBA just because I wanted to learn how business worked. And so I did the MBA. I mean, in this time period, I also got married. I had a couple kids, I guess, when I finished the MBA program. And my wife was teaching dance, Irish dance, which was a newer form, if you remember the river dance craze that kind of hit. And so usually people exit an MBA and think, hey, I'm going to go, get a job at a big company. I had an opportunity to go to Intel, but my wife and I looked at what we wanted, and I'd read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where it talks about you want assets, not just your income. So my wife and I decided to buy a house here in Utah with a studio behind it so that she could teach and still have the family, because we were making this trade-off. And I don't know, it was an interesting decision. We needed some family support financially to get into the house, to get the studio, this building remodeled, which had been a cabinet building. And then I actually had some trouble finding work, because you usually find a job and then move there, and I moved there and then looked for jobs. So I had about 18 months of the painful entrepreneurial, I'm working on this, but I'm also trying to get a job. And so I was kind of 18 months being unemployed with, 2 or 3 kids and a pregnant wife. So that was a little bit stressful, or a lot stressful, really. But then I got a job at Ancestry.com. If you're familiar with them, do all the genealogy stuff. So that kind of started me a little bit on this genealogy family stuff. I mean, I also had my own kids that I was worried about screwing up as a parent. So then I went to work for Ancestry for 3 years. Then I moved to a startup in genealogy for 3 years that didn't work out. And during that time, the 2007, 2008 financial crisis with real estate hit, and I ended up losing $250,000 in a transaction, which compromised my financial stuff and really weighed on me as a dad. Like, wow, I just made a very poor decision that is hurting my family's financial stuff. So that was a rough go. But then my wife and I kind of learned, well, we want to be able to take risks, but we need to reduce our risk profile. So then really over the next 5-6 years, we paid off about $350,000 in debt, got completely debt free so that we could take other risks. And then after that startup kind of went down, my mom said, oh, there's this professor at BYU who's writing a book on family and businesses. And since you don't have anything to do, maybe that's interesting to you. So I helped him research his book. Well, in the course of helping him write his book, I was like, hey, there's a better model. Look at this model. And I wrote up about 50 pages of how it would work and all this stuff. And he said, yeah, that's your book, not mine. So I never really had this big intent to write a book, but I feel like there's a lot of pieces in how you understand family. I mean, at the time I was doing family and business, and I was consulting at a company and doing this. And so I was like, there's so much overlap here. If we just apply a lot of the business principles to families, there's so much clarity in terms of why we're having divorces and why we're having, just all of the different family issues. It's because people are not holistically investing in their families. It's because, people are focused solely on money, because money had kind of been the singular it seems like in the U.S. it's become the singular metric for your family. So I kind of wrote that up. I was about kind of in the process getting it edited, and then I got a job at a company. There's about 20 people, and then over the next 4 years, we grew that company from 20 to about 180, and ended up taking about $54 million in private equity. And then I stepped away from it. But in that course of growing, I realized, hey, there's talking about the culture. And we had to develop a company culture. And I'm like, why don't families have cultures? Or why don't we teach our kids specific things? Why aren't we onboarding them better? Why aren't we hiring, like looking when we're trying to hire a spouse, get married, why are we not thinking about it more logically? And then, like, well, I married this girl who's attractive, but she's not a good match for the lifestyle that I'm going to live. So there's a lot of those overlaps. And then, so I finished that off. And then a year later, I've kind of published the book. And now I'm trying to get the ideas out there and really help families. And thus far, I haven't seen a lot of people go, businesses are heartless. I won't want my family like that. But after I give them a couple of examples, they immediately go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Oh yeah. So the passion for this work is more like I feel like I've found something that can help people, and I'm in a financial state right now where I don't need to focus so much on the money. And so I'm like, well, how do I help society? How do I help my own kids are getting older? How do I have an impact there? Because, all the money in the world isn't worth destroyed marriage and destroyed relationships with my kids. So that's kind of how I've refocused my life.
That's highly admirable. Such a great thing to do, because a lot of people need it. And I would imagine now in this post-COVID period, people need it more than ever. But the thing that gets me is when I talk to experts that are into relationships and family and that kind of realm of building, there's always fatal flaws. Everybody wants this. They want good relationships and they want families, but there's always that fatal flaw. As someone that's almost like really close to this all the time as a practitioner of it, what is that one thing that people always do wrong that they can easily correct or somehow identify and get better?
I think the single greatest flaw that most relationships have, and mine had it as well, is you don't really know where you're going. You don't really know why you married this person besides sexual attraction. So then you see couples that are like your life goals, what you want for your family, how you want to live your life. There's these very different missions. It'd be like going to a company, I want to start an accounting company, and you want to start a legal company, and we go into business together. It just doesn't make sense. So I think so many people don't really know what their purpose is beyond, well, I wanted to have kids, or I wanted to have sex, or I should have a family. It's like people saying, I want to be rich. Like, it's not about the wealth. It's about how are you going to contribute to society so that people give you money? How are you going to be such a massive contributor? How are you going to have a great business model? So that's what I think the fatal flaw is. Most people don't relationship. Or that's, I think, a lot of people don't get into relationships now is because they don't know where they're going. They haven't, and even I changed where I went. I was a mechanical engineer, then I went to business. I've done all these things. I helped a guy write a book that was just random. I've coded. It's like you have to have a plan of where you're going, even if it changes. And I just see so many people have these very abstract goals of, I want to be successful, but I haven't defined it. I want to be happy, but okay, what is that? I want to be wealthy. Well, what does this look like? So it's this lack of what is your actual purpose and mission. And if you go to the business world, you see Elon Musk, and I've heard people talk about him, and they're like, where he judges all his decisions based on, will it get us to Mars faster? And, so if you know where you're going, it's very easy to make decisions. If you don't, then you just end up with endless conflict, and there's not a way to resolve it because you're not, there's no collective purpose where you and your spouse are trying to go. So to me, that's where I feel like the biggest flaw is, are we on the same page trying to go to the same place? And if you're not, then it's an obvious, why did you ever get married? Why did you get together?
Yeah, that makes, I understand. I'm divorced myself, and I understand how all that works for sure. So in your life of being highly motivated and driven and giving of yourself, who's been a role model or a hero for you?
I guess, my dad would have been he has been one of the people who has always learned. He always read books. He was always up at stupid hours in the morning. If I was sick, I'd go up at 6 a.m. or something, and he'd be reading books. And he was always just this consumer of learning. And then he also had this term he would say, there's no mistakes, just learning opportunities. So it was very much about this thing of pushing yourself so that you could learn, but also so you could achieve. And so I think he was a great example of just keep moving forward and keep learning, and understanding that there is no learning without failure. So you have to be emotionally prepared for that. So he had very funny comics where when you get in your first car accident, he had some comics for that. And he just had this approach like, I don't want my kids to get hurt. I don't want them to do these things, but the odds are high that they will. So if I approach those things and say they're bad, then they won't learn, and then they'll try to avoid failure more than try to progress.
I love hearing stories like that from the old guard because it's just so it's a generation that's going away, really going away for good.
Yeah. Well, it's all the affirmation talk, right? I was at the early stages of, oh, you're great. You're like, if we tell everyone they're great, then they'll do great. And it's like, no, everyone gets great by going through it and becoming great. It's a process of becoming great. It is not you're great because we say you are.
Yeah, it's a destination that's a journey for sure. So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
At this point, I think Elon Musk is doing so much, what I perceive as so much good for the world. He is somehow managing his time. I don't love his relationships because I don't think I could have those, but I just look at him and think, how is he doing so much good? How is he able to juggle so much? And then there's just a place where there's a side of just appreciation, where when you see people like that, you go, I appreciate what you've done for humanity and society, and the inspiration. I would say probably Elon Musk at this point.
What is it in your life that motivates you? Every day you wake up, you have things that you want to do, things that you want to accomplish. What is it that ultimately is your motivator?
I would say my motivator is, I feel like I've been given so much that I have a moral obligation to give back. And I see suffering in the world. It seems kind of weird maybe, but I've had friends get divorces, and I think if I had shared some of the stuff I had learned, some of the stuff in the book, could I have prevented that suffering? So it's a moral obligation, both from the amount that I've been given, but also, can I consider myself a good person if I don't try to do the things that are going to most positively impact the world? And I personally don't think I can't say, oh, he's good. He has all this money and he does nothing with it. I'm like, no, a good person is someone who acts with the resources they have. And so the more resources I've been given, the more I feel like I need to give back and try to help as many people as possible.
Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into your 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could dispense some advice on that version of you based on the wisdom that you've gained, obstacles you've overcome, the person you've become. What would you tell that young version?
I would tell myself to spend a little more time on the relationships. I was very athletic and very, intelligent in terms of this engineering stuff. So I was kind of in the mode of, you just have to show how good you are in the athletic world, and then people will, recruit you. You have to show how good you are in the academic world or in the engineering or business world, and then people will want you on their team. And I agree with that, but I think there's this side where when I was in college, I spent less time than I should have or could have, I wouldn't say should, but could, developing relationships with other students, with other faculty. I did spend some time, so it's not total neglect, but it was the relationships, that combination of great relationships and great skills, people who are pushing. That is so much fun that I've gotten into the later part of my career where I'm with people who are pushing themselves, in their intellectual endeavors, but also building the relationships. And then you just see this flywheel effect. That's kind of why I wrote the book. It's like this flywheel effect happens not just with money, it happens with relationships as well. So I think it's make sure that I would have told myself, look at the people around you, even though some of them are in different things or they may not be what you would consider smart or in smart majors, but develop those relationships because you'll never know what can come of them. And my best job has come from a relationship I built over 15 years.
Of all of the things that you've done and accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Proud from, I would say most satisfied by, I would say my family. My relationship with my wife, probably most especially, it's been one of the things we've worked on the hardest. We've done this dance business. I got audited by the IRS. I had this period of time where I couldn't get a job, had this big debt problem. We've gone through so much, and to have her and I be able to work through it all, to have the kids, work through things with the kids, and all the fun issues, that's just, I wouldn't want to, of all the things that I wouldn't want to give up, that would be the most important to me. And so that's what I'd say I'm also the most proud of, because we have such a good relationship that we always have issues because we're strong personalities, but it's being able to work through the hard things and having the equity and capital in the relationship to continue to work through those. So I think it's a lot of work, but I would say it's something that I would want most for my kids and for other people as well.
So what has been one of the best fan letters or one of the best client responses you've ever gotten in your life that you always remember?
It was when I was working with this single mother, and she was talking about, having problems in the dating market and how she couldn't get things figured out and how she thought she was as independent. So I'm so independent and I do all these things. And then I brought up a few things, and I have this story in the book. I brought up a few things, and she said, well, you've just shattered my world. Like, I've had an epiphany. And now she's reframed a lot of those things. And then she was able to get working on the relationships that she really wanted to get, because she had all the economic success, but she was like, I don't really want it. I want this family success. So it was having the epiphany and the learning where she went, oh, I get it. I think that's what I personally love learning. And so seeing other people learn, that's my favorite thing.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, your family, your friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I am someone who is trying to do the most, to help people, to do the most good that I can. Yeah, so that's what I would say. That's really my motivation. It's someone who I want to be pushed. I want to learn. I love that side, but I want to be able to help. And I need to be trying to do the hardest thing I can. Otherwise, I personally don't feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm slacking. And so it's not an endless drive. I don't feel horrible. It's just, I feel like I've missed opportunities. So it's really about how am I contributing and how do I maximize that contribution?
It's a great answer. Aaron, this has been wonderful, man. Before we get out of the proverbial door, if anyone out there wants to get your book, learn more about you, anything related to your world, where is the best place for them to go?
I mean, the best place is probably, I have a website called The Family Flywheel, has my book. It'll take you to Amazon to buy that, or it has some blogs. You can also contact me. The email is aaron@thefamilyflywheel.com. I want to help people there. And then LinkedIn and Facebook, Aaron K. Shelley. I'm there as well.
This has been great, man. Aaron, I love your spirit of giving back and just how you roll, man. It's great. It's refreshing. It's things that we definitely need in this world more and more. So thank you for opening up and giving me some of your time today. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate your time. We'll see you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.